Welcome back to Go Permissionless, the podcast where we decode Bitcoin, freedom, and the future of money. I'm your host, Simon Elias. If you don't know me, that's fine, but just a little bit of information about me. I've set up quite a few businesses over the years, exited a couple of those tech businesses, which have been from sort of data platforms all the way through to now service delivery companies. So as of today, May 25, Bitcoin has had a market capitalization around $2.6 trillion, that's pretty big, right? It's massive. To put it into context, Bitcoin is now more valuable than most of the world's biggest corporations, including giants like Amazon and even Google, to name a few. But it still holds and trails, the likes of Apple and some other key brands out there, which obviously have a market capitalization slightly higher as well. But also looking at the number one spot, which is gold essentially, and it's really hard at the moment. And one of the biggest questions I've got is, when will Bitcoin actually get to the number one spot of market cap? So to figure this out, I've been using a bit of AI tools to kind of, look at this information, frame the information, and work out Bitcoin historical growth, but also look at what it would take to close the gap with Apple and also gold, as I said earlier on, to kind of beat these market caps. So let's rewind a little bit and talk about previous historical history. So 2013, Bitcoin's market cap was a mere $1.2 billion, which when you look at it in comparison to now, in 1.5 trillion, it's climbed a hell of a lot, right? So fast forward to 2021, where we are now, that's basically hit the 1 trillion mark. And now in 2025, it's doubled again to over nearly 2 trillion, basically, market cap. So that means over 12 years, Bitcoin's value grew by more than 1,700 times, which is crazy, right? Put that in perspective. What other asset classes kind of made this jump this quickly in a short space of time? Not many. But here's the thing. Its growth rate has slowed down. And as expected with any maturing asset, from 2013 to 2021, it was exponential. And this is the key word to be used out there for Bitcoin's growth, exponential. From 2021 to now, we're seeing more of a steady climb, which is, I think anyone who's sort of invested into Bitcoin has kind of seen that quite clearly. If we average out Bitcoin's recent annual growth rate, say around 18%, and project it forward, Bitcoin could overtake Apple's current market cap in about 2 years or less. So let that sink in just a little bit. And I've done a little bit of analysis against other market capitalizations of asset classes such as gold, silver, other precious metals, but also real estate. If you look at real estate, it's interesting. A lot of developers or investors are actually pulling out or acquiring Bitcoin alongside. So it makes you realize actually how fundamental Bitcoin can be for the future, and obviously now for investment. So what does that mean in terms of time scales to get Bitcoin to sort of the number one position? So essentially we're looking at around 2027 as a realistic potential crossover point if the current trend continues. And I think that's really important to mark out. These are all hypothetical questions that we ask, but it's good to kind of understand these hypothetical questions and see where we could end up and what would be the time period for Bitcoin to get to number one. But as we know, with any sort of investment, these are all wild cards at the moment. We need to obviously see how the market plays out, see if institutions are still going to keep piling in, which I think they will do. Pension funds, again, are going to start coming in, or have come in already. And that's only going to push the price of Bitcoin up essentially as well. So the other thing to look at is obviously this is going to be affected by things like regulatory frameworks. We've seen it in the UK in the last few weeks. The government just aren't keen on Bitcoin or crypto overall, really. They make it hard for everyone to participate in the networks. But if you look at places like America, it's completely different. So yeah, I think regulatory framework is going to be a big question mark. Also looking at global instability. I mean, that's a massive thing at the moment. If you look at the wars that are happening, I mean, even this week we have Pakistan and India, right, shooting rockets, to each other. That's going to be a big mix on global political affairs to make decisions for investors, or making decisions for investors slightly different. So global instability, regulatory framework, but also looking at network upgrades and innovation. So for example, if you look at the improvements to Bitcoin's ecosystem, like scaling security and easier cold storage facilities, which I've talked about previously about cold storage, it makes it more attractive to investors of all sizes. So just a few points there to go, look, why and how can Bitcoin get to number one position? We're at 5th position on a global level of asset classes by market capitalization. So Do let that sink in. Fifth place is huge. We're only now starting to see institutions pile in one by one. So corporations, you're seeing pension funds, as I said, are starting to come in, and also countrywide adoption. So if you start to look at America is now getting state by state regulatory frameworks to come in to basically get the states to buy state by state Bitcoin to put on their balance sheet to support, to support the national debt of the country, basically. So what happens when Bitcoin does reach this number? That's a really critical question to ask ourselves. It won't just be symbolic. It will mean the world's most valuable asset isn't just a tech company, a bank, or a government, which we know. No one's running this. There's no COO. There's no CIO. There's nobody running this network. Okay, it's purely, completely decentralized, which is what this is about. It's trustless, open source, and it's a monetary network in its own entirety. So if you think about it, that's a huge shift in power the world has never seen before. So we are on this transition phase. When I speak to friends and colleagues about this and try and educate them about Bitcoin a bit further, I always say we're traversing from TradFi, obviously into the Web 3.0. And I think it's going from like a V2 strategy of Web to V3. And that's kind of the best way to kind of articulate it to people when you speak to newbies. Again, it's also the ultimate validation of why we're here, learning, investing, building, and securing, most importantly, our freedom through Bitcoin. And I spoke about this previously on other videos. It's really about making sure you've got your cold storage policy in place. And if you started with the likes of Trezor or Ledger, then start to look at other cold storage facilities. We talked about Cold Card previously, working with Sparrow wallets. It's worth to do a bit more research into that. But then also, once you become more fluent in those sort of areas, is to really go a step higher and start to look at multi-sig storage. So for those wondering, is it now a good time to start investing into Bitcoin? We've seen prices surge up recently, and the question is yes. Don't sit on the fence if you're a property investor or you're an entrepreneur and you've got maybe a small business enterprise or a few businesses under your group. The question is, why are you not investing into Bitcoin yet? You're not late to the party. In fact, you're still extremely early. And I think that's really worth mentioning, that actually sooner rather than later is always a good option. And the reason I say that is because positioning yourself before Bitcoin becomes number one is what smart money is already doing. Okay. So if you've got money on the balance sheet of a business and it's just sitting there, surplus cash, and you're looking at investing into real estate, yeah, okay, great option, or gold or silver. But I came from a real estate background, investment in a portfolio of properties. My issue is I'm now downscaling them, selling them, and putting the cash funds into Bitcoin. And the question you probably ask yourself, and I mentioned this on previous videos, why? It's really simple. It's, we go back to the fundamentals of Bitcoin. It's immutable. It's fully transportable. Like selling property takes 6 months, right? On average. It might take more. Depends on the market. I mean, now we're in a bad market. My area where I invested into originally up north was a really, really great area, and it still is. But selling property, if you look back before December 24, there was hardly much stock on the market. Fast forward to now, because of regulatory frameworks and tax implications from this lovely government that we're in, makes it really, really hard and difficult to trade in property, but it takes a long time to sell that physical asset class. Fast forward to Bitcoin, I can sell Bitcoin extremely quickly. So, I think the fundamentals of it becoming a more mature asset are happening right in front of our eyes. The fact that we've got countries, institutions, as I said, pension funds that are coming on, country statewide adoption, it's never too late. Now is the time. In fact, it's a critical period. So that's it for today's episode. I hope you found that really useful. Haven't been on here for a while because I only really want to put out content that's really, really useful. I'm not one of these people who just keeps blurting out content just to keep the algorithms going, even though I know algorithms are key in this market. My approach is literally to help entrepreneurs, property investors, but also business owners generally to look at how they can invest their surplus funds. So that's it for today. If you found this really helpful, please do follow me, like the video, that also helps. And if you want to go deeper, whether it's securing your Bitcoin cold storage, planning for generational wealth, or understanding how to use Bitcoin to gain financial freedom, check out the links that I'm going to show in the show notes below. Other than that, most importantly, have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.